Where in the Herd is Tiffany, where we talk about travel, lifestyle, and mental health. Follow us on Instagram at Sweet Tiffies, Twitter at Sweet Tiffies, Facebook Sweet Tiffies Inspirations, and Tiffany-Travels.com. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Welcome back to Where in the Herd is Tiffany. On today's video, we are going to be talking about what happened, y'all. I missed my cruise ship, okay? I'm smiling now, but I was like, I was boo-hoo crying, y'all, when I missed my cruise ship. So stay tuned to see what happened, and yeah, let's get straight into it. Okay, y'all, let's get straight into it. This is going to be story time, okay? I hate to be telling this story, but I guess it's all in the name of adventure, okay? So I booked a Carnival cruise, the Carnival Radiance, out of Long Beach, California. It was supposed to be a birthday trip. It was a 5-day cruise. It was going to Ensenada and Cabo, okay? So prior to this cruise, I had been traveling quite a bit. I had been in DC for a while, and I had took a group trip to Mexico. Join us on the next one. And so it was a lot going on. I will preface it to say that. And so I came back the day of the cruise, getting ready to go, packing, washing, all that kind of good stuff for preparation, right? So I go to my mother's house and I pick up a luggage. And I say, Mom, sorry, Mom, I'm putting you on blast. But I say, hey, Mom, what time does the ship leave? Or what time am I supposed to be on the boat? That's what I asked her. And she said, we need to be down there by 4. And I said, okay. Well, I am not the most on-time person, right? But I had planned to be there before 4, okay? So because she said be there by 4, I'm thinking the boat departs at 5, right? This is not unusual that the boat departs at 5 because we've taken 3-day cruises several times and they've left at 5 o'clock. So didn't ring a bell, no alarm sounded or anything like that, right? So at about 2:55, I get a phone call from my mother and she says, Tiffany, where are you? They're about to close the doors. And I said, close the doors for what? What are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, they're about to close the doors. And I was like, so do you mean, wait, huh? Like, it was just all kind of bells and confusion. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, so do you mean that I'm about to miss this cruise? So she asked somebody at the port, like, what if she comes down here in 20 minutes? Cause she's still gonna, they were like, no, the door is closing at 3 o'clock. So I was like, I don't know, like I was on my way out the door. So I like kind of grabbed my stuff and went to the door. Like maybe I can hurry up and get down there. Yeah, it wasn't happening. It was like, and you're not getting on this boat. So the reality begins to set in that I have just missed my cruise. That I have been planning and needed and wanted. Okay, y'all. I have been traveling domestically, but to me, a vacation is sun and fun and food and all the above, which describes a cruise. So I was extremely upset. I called to different people to tell them what happened, and I was just like, seriously, y'all, I was a boo-hoo crying, like crying, okay? Like, y'all probably never seen me cry before, but I definitely cry when it calls for it. So I was just like so confused. I didn't understand, like, how could I miss this cruise? What happened? Like, I'm just trying to like go back into myself and say what happened. So wow, I partly blame my mother. Sorry, Mom. I guess I can say I partly blame myself, and partly blame myself is because I believe my mother did send me an email about a month prior to the trip, right? But mind you, I kid you not, when I saw this email, initially, I'm sure I looked at it, but I probably looked at everything else except for the departure time. And I never went back to revisit that email since a month ago. And the reason why I didn't think to check anything was because my mother sounded very confident. She was like, you need to be there for it. She didn't say, I think. She didn't say, I don't know. She said it very confidently, and she booked the entire trip. So why wouldn't I trust her? She's getting all the information, right? Wrong. So some of the things that went wrong right here was the fact that I think she just assumed. She didn't really check her email. She just assumed from prior to before. And the crazy part about it is my mother is an on-time person, okay? And she usually gets to the cruise around 11, 12 o'clock in the morning, afternoon. This particular time, she was waiting for the rest of my family members, so she decided not to go early. Had she went early, like normally, she would be able to tell me, Tiffany, you need to be down here, you know, by 3 o'clock or by 2 o'clock or whatever the case it is. So because that did not happen, a lot of things went along with that. And that is ultimately how I missed my cruise. It's not a big story, not outlandish. It wasn't a flight delay. It wasn't an automobile accident. It was literally a mix-up in the time and the fact that I didn't get there like super early, right? So had I gotten there, you know, 2 hours early or 3 hours early, no, at least 3 hours earlier, then I definitely could have made the cruise, right? So that's why I partly blame her and I partly blame myself, okay? So that is the story of how and why I missed my cruise. So y'all, I was very, very distraught, as I said before, right? So I posted this status on Facebook and I said, hey y'all, oh my God, I'm so sad I missed my cruise. So there's a bunch of different comments, and a couple comments said, hey, why don't you try to join them at the next port? And I was like, no, the next port is in Cabo. And they were like, why don't you go to the Tijuana airport, which would be like 2.5 hours away from me for a cheaper flight, right? And I was like, nope, I'm not doing all that. I had just came back from Tijuana the day before, and I wasn't about to do all of that, right? So I contacted another friend. I was like, oh my God, guess what? I just missed my cruise. And she was like, girl, you should try to get on the cruise. And I'm like, no, it's too much. So she actually looked up the flight from LAX, which is closer to me. And she was like, oh, it's only $130. And I was like, well, maybe I should try it. But I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do that. Long story short, I called Carnival, right? So I called them twice. The first time I called them based off of the fact that I missed this cruise and what do I do next, right? So basically the lady said that because you missed the cruise, you will get your port and taxes back. That's the law. I think it was like $115. And the other $200-ish, because the cruise was around $3 something, I would basically lose that, right? But after explaining to her what happened about the mix-up in the times, not getting the communication, she told me to email this email address and tell them the situation and ask them if I can have a future cruise credit. And so I said, okay, got off the phone. Okay, that was the first call. The second phone call was me asking, so I missed this cruise. Is there a way that I can get to the next port, right? So thank God I ended up getting this wonderful Carnival cruise rep. Shout out to him. He was wonderful. So basically, he stayed on the line with me for 2 hours. So the process of getting on at the next port is the Carnival cruise rep has to actually contact the ship that we're on. I was on the Carnival Radiance. I don't know who the officer is or who that person is, but they contacted them, right? And so I was like, well, how long does it take for an answer? You know, and he was like, it can take a couple hours, an hour, or all day. It just depends, right? So he contacted them. Again, it took more than 2 hours because I was on the phone with him for 2 hours, but he was very patient with me. We actually was talking about random travel stuff throughout this time because we had such a long wait, right? So at some point in that 2 hour call, they did respond back, but I think they wanted to know, I don't know if they wanted to know some information about me, but they didn't say yes and they still didn't say no. So his shift was about to be over. So we exchanged Instagram infos. And he said, well, I will basically transfer this call to somebody else, or if they respond before my shift is over, I will contact you back. Okay, fine. In the meantime, I did start to look up flight prices for Cabo, and I did literally see it for $130 something, but in the midst of me talking to him, it went up to like 170 something, right? So what I should have done was I should have booked it at 130 and canceled it if needed to be, right? But I didn't do that, right? So I would say maybe like 30 minutes to an hour after he got off the phone with me, he then let me know that the cruise approved for me to actually take my flight out, right? So I had to provide him with the flight information to let them know when I would be getting there, okay? So I basically booked the ticket and I was ready to go for the next morning, okay? As I'm going to sleep, y'all, I was like, let me check my ticket to make sure what time I need to be up tomorrow for this flight, right? Y'all, made another mistake. I looked at the ticket. Why did I book the ticket for a week that was 2 weeks later? I wouldn't have been going nowhere again for a second time. So luckily it was less than 24 hours because I had just booked the ticket and I was able to cancel the ticket and I was able to rebook for the correct date, which would have been for the following day, okay? And that first ticket was $91 and that's probably because it was for 2 weeks later. But then the ultimate price was like 170 something for that ticket to Cabo, okay? Okay, so now fast forward to the next morning. I get to the LAX airport. I think it was Alaska Airlines, check in. There's a different process for, I guess if you're going international to Mexico, they're going to ask for your passport. They need to check everything before you can even board the flight, okay? And for some reason, I didn't have a seat at the time. So she checked my passport and then I went back up there to get my seat. And luckily I waited to the end because she asked me, do I want a window or out? And I just chose an aisle seat, okay? So get on the flight. The flight is 2.5 hours. Everything is fine. I started to talk to my seatmate next to me and asked her, how do I get to the port? Because the way Cabo Port is, the Carnival cruise ship is on sea and you have to take these ferries over to the port to the boat. So basically I was asking the lady, how does all of this work? Luckily she was super nice lady. Shout out to Beatrice, I believe. She told me where to go to the transportation, how to get to the ferry and the ports. And so that all worked out fine. So leaving the airport, immigration, I kid you not, to get my luggage, it took less than 15 minutes to do all of that. Once I got outside, I took a shared shuttle, which was about $17. And I think it was 4 people in the car. So it took about, I would say it took like a little over an hour to drop everybody else off. And so finally I get down to the ports. And so I get down there and it's almost like there's a bunch of boats and you'll see the video. There's a bunch of boats. So I walked in a U near Senora Frogs. And I asked and let them know that I was there. So that took a process too. That, kid you not, probably took 20-30 minutes. They had to look at my passport. They had to radio into the Carnival cruise that I was actually there. So that took a while for them to respond and whatever. Was able to finally get on the small boat to get over to the actual Carnival cruise. Then I had to wait again for an officer to come get me from downstairs to take me upstairs. And as I'm about to get on the elevator, these people are like, hey, Tiffany, hey, Tiffany, hey, Tiffany. Mind you guys, I'm irritated. I'm just tired. I'm just ready to get on the boat, to check in, to get back off, to hang out in Cabo. And so I turn around and this lady was like, hi, Tiffany, I'm the reason why you're here. And I was like, oh, I did like this. Like, thank you so much. Because she said that I was able to come. And so luckily she did say yes. What I forgot to mention, and I'll mention it now. So basically, if you miss your cruise, there is a possibility that in order to catch up with the cruise at a different port, you may have to pay a fine. Now, there is this thing called the Passenger Vessel Service Act of 1886. And it says vessels may not transport passengers between ports in the United States, okay? So I'm going to let you all read more on it. It's a little bit confusing to explain it, which is why I'm not going to explain it, but look it up. Passenger Vessel Service Act of 1886, okay? So basically, I could have been fined to go to Cabo. Thank God I wasn't fined because they said you could be fined from anywhere to $0 to $1,000, right? It just depends on what they say. And sometimes if there's multiple people in your family that miss the port, and the fees are $400 per person, it may not be worth it to catch it up to the next port. So that's another thing that happened when I called as well to see if I can catch it. Okay. So yes, basically that is what happens when you miss your I keep saying it wrong. When you miss your embarkation ports, okay? So that is what happened. Just to recap really quickly, if you miss it, you are going to call Carnival, you're going to call your travel agent, whoever you're going to call, and you're going to basically just see if they'll allow you to come. And if they allow you to come, then you're going to see, is it worth it, money, time-wise, all of that, to even catch the next port, right? Because I had a 5-day cruise and I would have caught Cabo on technically like the second or the third day, I felt like it was worth it. So let's just talk about the cost really quick of everything. So my flight was $171. I took an Uber that was $30 to the airport. I had to take the shared shuttle from the Cabo airport to the port. So I would say that was what, like a little, almost like $300. Oh, and my luggage was $30, right? So 171 plus another 30, that's 90. Yeah, that was almost about $300. So was it worth it? I don't know yet. Because I was able to catch up, but that price that I used to catch up to the cruise was about the same amount that I paid for the entire cruise. So it really just depends on if you feel like it's worth it or not. Okay.
This is what happens when you miss your port to the cruise. You're at the airport trying to catch the next port. Do not be like me. Ooh. So I guess for Cabo, they have to check your passport.
Once again, folks, if you guys are in a party of more than one, go ahead and start handing everybody in their party their own passports and their own boarding passes. As you guys board the aircraft, it has to be opened up to the picture page, along with your boarding pass inside.
Yes. This is where you enter the ship. I finally made it to Cabo. So you can't just get straight on the cruise ship. You have to get on one of these. So they take people on and take people back. Oh, here's the Carnival cruise. I finally made it.
So now that I have missed my cruise, I do not want you to ever make the same mistake as me and miss your cruise on embarkation day. Like, it's different if you miss it on a port, but you should not be missing an embarkation day like I did. Now, I'm pretty sure this probably happens more often than not, but like me, I never want that to happen again. If I pay for something for a vacation, I want to go on that vacation. So let me give you a couple tips to make sure that that does not happen to you, okay? So the first thing is, if someone else is booking your cruise, like my mother booked the cruise for our family, you need to make sure that they are adding your email address to the itinerary so that you're getting the email. So that was mistake number one. My email address was not added to the itinerary, so therefore I was not getting any of the email communication from the cruise, right? Any communication that I got, I would have to get it from my mother, because the only place that says the departure time of the cruise is on the itinerary, which I never got the itinerary from the cruise ship itself, because my email address was not added when she first booked it. She called and booked it, right? So I will say, number one, if somebody else is booking it, make sure your email is included so that you get all of the communication related to your cruise. That is step number one, okay? Step number two is making sure you check your itinerary, because the itinerary is going to tell you where your port's at, and it's going to tell you the departure time for your embarkation, which is that first place that you get on, and how do you say it? I can't even say the word, but it's going to tell you where your other departures and ports are on the itinerary. I looked high and low on Google, on cruise, on carnivalcruise.com. There was nowhere that said the departure time of your port. And when I finally clicked a link on something, it said that it was on your itinerary. Well, your itinerary will be with the person who booked it in the first place, which goes back to having that email communication, okay? So definitely making sure you check your itinerary, double, triple checking your itinerary to make sure what your departure time is. Another thing I will say is to just get to your cruise early, okay? So I believe that you can get on the cruise at 11 or 12 in the afternoon. Don't quote me on that. Check for yourself. But you can get on there quite early compared to when the departure time is, right? So I highly recommend getting there at least 2 to 3 hours before, right? So let's say my departure time was 4. That was the time that it departed, not when I was supposed to be there. So if the departure time was 4, I would say get there at 1. I would say get there at 2, making sure that you at least have 2 hours to get there, because although you can still board the ship until 3 o'clock, there could be a flight delay, there could be an accident, there could be a tire blow, like there could be anything that can happen on your route there, right? And so it really sucks that I only stay like 30 minutes away from the cruise port and still missed it, right? So making sure that you get there in time. And the reason for that is because it's harder to try to get to the next port, even get on the cruise. It's not like a airline where you can, oh, okay, I'm going to get the next flight leaving out tonight or the next flight leaving on. It's a little bit more trickier to make sure that you get onto the port, okay? And then the other thing I'm going to say is make sure you get the travel insurance. Another mistake I made. Well, I'm not going to say I made the mistake. I was not even given the option. When my mom booked the cruise, she didn't ask did we want insurance, and partly my fault. I didn't be like, hey mom, did you get the insurance? I didn't ask any questions, right? So I will say get the insurance. The Carnival Cruise rep said that had I gotten the insurance, I possibly could have gotten a refund for the cruise that I missed. I don't know how true that is, because the reason why I missed the cruise wasn't because of an accident, because of a flight delay. So I'm not really sure how true that is, but I still recommend getting the insurance because you never know what it covers, okay? So definitely utilize those tips to make sure that you get on your cruise on time. And do not miss your embarkation date, okay? Well, y'all, thank y'all for listening to my story time. I hope that it was helpful so you can see what you would do in case you miss your cruise. But please try not to miss your cruise, because you don't want to be sad and crying and spending extra money like me and feeling sad when you get off the boat because you feel like you got shortchanged because you didn't get all of your 5-day cruise, okay? So definitely make sure that you are be careful, and happy cruising.